Want to know how I got into Bloody Roar? No? Well, I need an intro to this video, so too bad, I'm going to tell you anyway. I actually read about Bloody Roar 2 back when it came out, but my brother owned the PlayStation and we were still very territorial about our systems. So I didn't get to play it, and eventually I forgot about it by the time he let me have the PlayStation. Then in 2002 I went here. This building in Primal, Ohio used to be a circuit city, and in the game section there was a demo station set up for the Nintendo GameCube. One of the games being demoed was Bloody Roar Primal Fury. I rented the game twice after that, from this building, which used to be a Blockbuster behind my parents' house, before buying it from this building, which was an EB Games. And well, here we are at the fourth part of the Bloody Roar retrospective. Bloody Roar Primal Fury. Or Bloody Roar Extreme. Why did they change the title again? Primal Fury / Extreme was the first of its kind in many regards for the Bloody Roar series. It was the first game to hit store shelves in North America before Japan. It was the first game to have no arcade release. It was the first GameCube fighting game to be released, but only if you don't count Smash Bros. Melee. It was the first game of the series to be released on Nintendo GameCube and Microsoft Xbox, though the Xbox version came out months later, and in Europe it released around the same time as Bloody Roar 4.
Oops.
And it was the first game to not be released on a Sony platform, which according to an IGN interview with director Kenji Fukuya, happened because of the GameCube's hardware specs, namely in the lighting and shading options. Then again, he also said the game was never considered for Xbox and was, quote, always destined for the GameCube. So take that with an egg on your face sized grain of salt. Either way, at least Primal Extreme Fury for the GameCube released in North America with few other notable titles overshadowing it. Except Virtua Fighter 4, which came out 2 days earlier and received almost universal critical acclaim.
Ouch. Well, I hope the boss of the guy who set the release date wasn't too harsh on him.
Do you have good legs?
I guess.
Good. Because you'll need them while you're standing in the unemployment line, clutching your stomach because you've had to eat your shoes!
However, I can't say they didn't do at least some promotional work for the game. Among other things, Primal Fury did get a 7-page insider strategy section in volume 155 of Nintendo Power. The article explained basic gameplay, including the get a free throw at the beginning of the fight because the AI usually won't do anything about its strategy, as well as character profiles with brief background on each of them, sometimes lasting less than a sentence, which is still more than the instruction book for the game ever had. The article also unleashes the unholy, mind-bending destructive power, simply known as Unlisted Move. The thing is, whoever wrote these either didn't know what was going on in Primal Fury, or recycled the profiles from Bloody Roar 2 and 3. The Tyron Corporation is mentioned several times even though they have nothing to do with Primal Fury. What's actually happening is summarized in the opening text crawl before arcade mode, which says the Kingdom of Zoanthropes,
Which exists now, I guess.
a place for zoanthropes to live peacefully, depends on its zoanthrope army and mercenaries for protection and income.
In other words, a bunch of zoanthropes, in order to escape persecution and live a normal life, all gathered in one place where everyone, including the people who hate them, knew where they would be. So now not only do they have to fight to survive, they also have to do so as the main part of the kingdom's economy. Welcome to the Third World, Kingdom of Zoanthropes!
Oh, and apparently there are some experiments going on to figure out why people become zoanthropes.
And starting in left field today for the Zoanthrope Kingdom, a plot point that hasn't been addressed since Bloody Roar 2!
And so, to bring people together and or get them to shut up about the experiments, and or show off how strong their mercenaries are,
Only 2 playable characters in this game are from the Zoanthrope Kingdom, and neither of them are mercenaries.
A tournament with a cash prize is held. I should note that aside from this opening crawl, there's nothing in the gamer manual to explain what the hell anyone is doing. The only other story background I could find leading up to the in-game events were from some mostly poorly translated character profiles originally posted on the now-defunct BloodyRoar.com, which I struggled with so much I had to hire someone to help me read through them.
Thank you, SCR, for I, Reginald Hogsworthy IV, or Reggie, am the only person that can adequately read something as destructive to the English language as this. So, shall we begin? It is unable to put under control because of the enormous power given to this type. Uranus is detuned and less expensive since the wrecking power is suppressed. So I heard, therefore, I was expecting a monster to appear. But what an amiable sleeping face she has. Sweetie, your belly is exposed. Oh, please, do not scratch too much. She seems drooling. Well, wake up. It's time already. Gong. Who are you? My name is written on this business card of mine. I asked your mother about you downstairs. Then she told me to go upstairs and wake you up. So I am here. My goodness, your business card is written in English. I can't read English. Then let me explain briefly. We are having fighting tournament in the near future in our country. And I want to invite you to the game. I am here to ask for your participation. You mean it's an athletic game? After this conversation, I spent 3 hours in her bedroom to wake her up. But even my unconquerable toughness and patience were not able to diminish her strong instinct of sleeping. And I couldn't help retreating from her bedroom. Next time, I will pray her with food. Hurrah! You're welcome. Now get back to what you were doing.
So, since the game doesn't address what's going on until the endings, it's only fair that I don't either. Meanwhile, the cover art was split into a few different kinds. Here's the Japanese GameCube box art, the American Xbox box art, and the American GameCube box art. I'll spare you the rant about having Jenny on the cover again, because this is actually worse than the art for Bloody Roar 3. It's supposed to depict Jenny mid-transformation, in front of Yugo's beast crest for some reason.
Why are they still using the beast crests?
But if you're not a fan already and have no knowledge of this series, much less this character, would you ever guess that she's turning into a bat? Or in her case, something that kinda sorta resembles a bat? That and it suffers from the old, trying to be intense but instead looking constipated problem that shows up in a lot of box art.
I know I said I'd hold off on doing this for now, but maybe there's something in her character background that'll explain why she's on the box art.
Jenny finishes taking shower as usual, with water as hot as almost burning skins, and comes out from bathroom. How many times has she looked at her nude body, which matches perfectly to the glittering night view in wintertime under the lights of skyscrapers of the city? The ripe time for a usual woman passes like an arrow, but it is almost eternal for Jenny. Her naked body looks as if...
Never mind.
The core of the design crew of the series was retained from Bloody Roar 3. The director, game designer, producer, graphic coordinator, half the programmers, and some of the graphic designers are the same. Those that didn't come back are pretty apparent though. On the music front, Jun Kajiwara's spot was filled by Kenji Miura, aka Kenmi Chank, or as he's credited, just Kenmi. He's played with various music acts such as Julian Fouth and Jim Armstrong and the Sonic Deli Band, and he's by no stretch of the imagination a bad guitar player. There's no credit for anyone for bass and drums, though the sounds for the drum kit sound eerily similar to some of the MIDI drum kits I have on one of my old copies of Cakewalk Music Creator. Also out was composer Takayuki Negishi, replaced by Hiromichi Furuya, who previously did music for Mario Party 2 and 3. The end result is a very mixed bag. Many tracks from the game seem to suffer from the same problem, where they start strong and have decent guitar licks and solos later on, but in between those 2 points, the music just seems to mill around with no clear direction, like it's just there to kill time until the next part kicks in. It's largely background noise, neither complementing nor detracting from the action. It's just there. Meanwhile, the entire Carmel Mama staff was replaced by a new crew because, rather than having static drawings, all the characters are animated for the intro and endings. Many of the people involved with these scenes worked on things like Comic Party, Love Hina, Magical Angel Sweetmints, Cowboy Bebop the movie, and various other anime. As a result, these scenes are more like watching an anime intro than a fighting game intro, what with the whole 3 seconds of fighting it contains, non-sequitur scenes that contribute nothing, and weird transitions like going from Yugo on a motorcycle to Long doing nothing, to the motorcycle again, to Bakaru leading a business meeting on a plane, to Uriko annoying Shenlong, to Alice walking on a beach. Half the intro seems like it fits, but the rest seems like it's either an anime stereotype or AMV bait for 80s power ballads.
Wasted days and sleepless nights, and I can't wait to see you again.
And while I'm near the subject, I suppose I should introduce the 2 new characters, Kronos the Phoenix and Ganesha the Elephant. The origins of these 2 can probably be traced back to a poll conducted on the official Japanese Bloody Roar website in April of 2001, where fans were asked what beast forms they'd like to see. Among the top 10 results, number 2 was some type of bird, number 4 was a penguin, and number 7 was an elephant. And, number 5 was a fox.
Get out.
Kronos is the prince of the Zoanthrope Kingdom, and has a very graceful, at times ballet-like fighting style, with lots of quick-hitting attacks and short combos that can tie into each other. But his most unique trait is having 2 different beast forms. His regular beast form is...
You know, I've been waiting a while to be able to use this clip.
I am not a human being! I am an animal!
Kronos' penguin form is far from ideal compared to everyone else in the game, as it's pretty weak and his punches and kicks have way less range than in any other form. However, it does have some perks. For one, successfully landing an air recovery dropkick in this form is immensely satisfying. Second, as a penguin, Kronos can use several low and mid-height beast attacks to keep opponents grounded. More importantly though, the penguin form's height makes it so he can't be hit by high attacks and can't be thrown, making him frustrating to play against as a chain grappling character. Not only that, one of Kronos' beast drives drains the beast gauge of the opponent and adds it to his own, knocking them out of beast form if they were in it. As for his Hyper Beast Phoenix form, Kronos has access to a modified form of his human moveset, as well as a different set of beast attacks that allow him to fly around the battlefield. Oh, and remember that absorbing the beast gauge beast drive? It can absorb an opponent's beast gauge to make Kronos' hyper form last longer. Then there's Ganesha, the other hidden character who is Kronos' bodyguard and the slowest and heaviest character in the game. If you thought stun was made for less brawling and more chain throwing, Ganesha is even more heavily geared toward chain throwing, including one throw which has 2 separate throw chains that branch off of it.
This is also an opportune time to play the Count the Wrestling Moves drinking game.
Let's just do this for throws against a standing opponent. We have a spinebuster, sidewalk slam, a rather violent Boston Crab, a headlock takedown, power slam, giant swing, wheelbarrow suplex, and for one beast drive, we have a torture rack followed by a split-legged pile driver. Most of the returning characters received some sort of redesign, while having one alternate costume that was either used in 3 or is a crude palette swap. Some characters stay relatively consistent with their look, like Zeon or Busuzima, though he did swap the Hawaiian shirt for a sweater and suddenly grew a spiky, flowing green almost mullet.
Oh my God! I'm gorgeous!
Some look closer to designs from before Bloody Roar 3, like Gato. Then there are characters like Yugo, who went for the tryhard who just got his first skateboard look. Trust me, I know from experience what that looks like. Then you have characters with slightly more jarring changes made to them, such as Alice. The blue hair and pigtails as well as the old clothing design are gone, replaced by straight black hair and more modest clothes that, frankly, make her look a fair bit older than she actually is. And then there's Sheena. What the hell happened here? Sheena had a little of everything changed. Her clothes kinda sorta resemble her third costume in 3, but she's one of the last people I would expect to see in a pink tank top and... is that nail polish? Her hairstyle and color changed as well, and judging from her radically different skin tone, she and Gato both look like they got left in the oven for too long between games.
Okay, oven's preheated to 350. Now I just set this to bake and wait until they're golden brown or knocked out.
KO!
That and the jiggle issue is really apparent thanks to the player selection screen, where the characters fly into the foreground at cartoonish speeds.
Too close, a little too close.
Then again, there are consistency problems across the board with characters looking different between the animated scenes and the in-game models. Long's hair is green in the cutscenes for some reason. Uriko's face seems to change every other scene she's... Ah! Yugo's clothes are missing some graphics from the in-game models, Gato's body is shaped like Johnny Bravo, and Sheena almost looks like a different person entirely, in what looks like a communication breakdown between the animators and designers. In addition to new looks, their voices also changed. While the Japanese version used several of the same VAs from Bloody Roar 3, the entire voice cast was overhauled for the non-Japanese releases. That means Samantha Vega, the voice of Fox and Jenny to this point, was out of a job. So was Barry Geard, who played Bakaru in Bloody Roar 1 and then Yugo in Bloody Roar 3.
How could you possibly turn away the talents of a man who gave us such memorable video game voice acting moments as this?
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich. It's really powerful, especially against living things.
You saved me!
Yeah.
This is one of only a couple major differences between versions. Everything else is just minor presentation things, like how the Japanese version says "thank you for playing" at the end of arcade mode, while the other versions don't. I guess the American playtesters took it the wrong way or something.
Thank you for playing!
Don't patronize me!
Not only was the previous cast entirely redone, they were replaced with some pretty notable talent that had prior experience with either anime dubbing, the Metal Gear Solid series, or both. Cam Clark, better known as Liquid Snake or Kaneda from Akira, voiced Bakaru and Kronos. Earl Bowen and Vanessa Marshall, Sergei and Olga Golukovich from Sons of Liberty, voiced Ganesha and Jenny in Uranus. Quentin Flynn, aka Raiden, played Zeon. Jennifer Hale, aka Naomi Hunter, played Alice, Sheena, and Uriko. And Paul Lighting, aka Colonel Roy Campbell, played Gato and the announcer. And thanks to him, I need to relearn how to pronounce some of these characters' names.
Bakuyu!
Bakuyu!
Busujima!
Busujima!
Yoriko!
Yoriko!
Koryu!
Koryu!
Most everyone does a decent job, though as talented as Jennifer Hale is, I think she might have been stretched a bit too thin voicing 3 different characters, as Uriko,
Yoriko!
whatever, sounds like she's 12 as opposed to just acting like it, and Sheena sounds like she's impersonating one of the dumbass blondes from Bring It On.
You win!
I'm ready again anytime.
Let's not put the duh in dumb.
Also, this game might be the closest Busuzima,
Busujima!
whatever, has come to sounding like a normal person.
Round!
Well, as close to normal as he's ever going to get.
Just to recap, most of the characters are heading into the 4th game in this series, and don't have a consistent look, voice, music, or setting to associate with them. Thankfully, the programming is still consistent. Mostly.
Bloody Roar games always ran pretty smooth to this point, and Primal Extreme Fury is no exception. However, it does load matches noticeably faster than the previous entries, and most of the levels are bright, vivid, and lively. Well, aside from the two-dimensional guys hanging out in the Indian Palace. That said, a number of them are rehashes of environments from Bloody Roar 3, with either minor touch-ups or keeping the layout while changing parts of the environment here and there. Back Alley and Midnight Rooftop are nearly identical to how they looked in 3. Indian Palace and Asian Gate changed up the backgrounds a bit, but the area you fight in is virtually the same. The aircraft carrier is also identical, save for some little things, like this random guy in the back who turns around to cheer on the fight when they don't have any jets to prep for takeoff. And then there's the evil laboratory. This is far less blatant as they did change much of the background and the arena, though it seems more like they took the old final stage and made it look less like it was put together in Minecraft. And lastly, there's the Chaos Lab, where they just took the evil lab, had whatever this is spazzing out a little more, and threw a giant red filter over everything.
Creativity is hard. I wasn't trying to be sarcastic. I mean, it really is pretty hard. I mean, trying to come up with entirely new things. Just go to the next bit.
In fact, there are only a few new levels in the game, and only some, namely the aquarium and the Chinese temple, take advantage of a new feature. Sending an opponent through certain walls in certain areas doesn't result in a ring out, but instead lets the fight continue in a new area. It's a nice touch, but without using cheats, the walls usually don't break to get to these areas unless you intentionally knock or throw your opponent into them several times. That's also assuming something like this doesn't happen. As for the last stage, the freeway does have one main redeemable quality, the ability to knock people into oncoming traffic. They'll even continue to get hit while the victory animation plays.
You win!
Die now!
Make no mistake though, despite what Wikipedia and TV Tropes would have you believe, Extreme/Primal Fury is not a GameCube port of Bloody Roar 3.
Get your shit together, Internet.
On top of what's been covered already, a number of characters had their movesets tweaked. One of the more prominent changes is for Yugo, who lost his crescent somersault kick and gained a single command counterattack. The same counterattack he would do out of his quarter circle forward punch flicker move. A few other characters have counters too, like Sheena's single leg crab takeover, Bakuru's whatever, teleporting line drop which replaced one of his line running techniques, or Kronos' high snap kick counter. To me, this seems to slow down the combat a bit, though the game in general is a bit slower than Bloody Roar 3 anyway, coming closer to 2 and 1 in terms of play speed. There were also big changes made to how Hyper Beast form worked. Now instead of needing a full beast gauge to use it, fighters can go into Hyper Beast mode at any time. Even if you have a completely empty beast gauge that won't allow you to go into beast form, you can still go into hyper mode, which means being able to go into Hyper Beast form multiple times in the same round. The trade-off is supposed to be that a portion of your health is sacrificed if the beast gauge isn't filled when going into Hyper Beast form, which can range from a small fraction to up to half a health bar. However, when you consider that beast drives can recover a portion of health lost, the blue bar specifically, and Hyper Beast form can use multiple beast drives in a 12-second span, this doesn't seem like much of a trade-off. Just spam beast drives as soon as you get into the form. It doesn't even matter if they connect because you'll recover health for doing it at all. The more glaring issue with making the switch to the GameCube, though, was the controls. Not because they had to be changed around or weren't adapted properly, but because of the controller itself. It's not the most ideal setup for a fighting game. though despite the button size and placement, namely the small B button, I didn't have much of an issue with them. What I did struggle with at first was the GameCube's D-pad, which is a little over 2/3 the size of the one on the PS2 controller. The stick is nice though, especially for a game that has several quarter circle and half circle inputs. However, one thing that could be troublesome is the shoulder buttons. I don't know why, but sometimes if I tried sidestepping one way, my character would move the opposite direction. The GameCube controller is functional, but overall, I'd still take the more uniform, PlayStation-style controller over it. I'd still take the GameCube controller over the Xbox controller, though. Between the clunky D-pad and how I had to angle my thumb to use the control stick, it just hurt my hand to play after a while.
I must have your beautiful hands.
As far as unlockables go, Primal Fury combined most of what Bloody Roar 1, 2, and 3 had to offer, and tied almost everything, save for unlocking Uranus, to completing arcade mode. Not with each character, mind you, just finishing arcade mode up to 16 times to unlock a bunch of extra modes and in-game options in a certain order. If nothing else, it can make for some interesting computer battles, such as high-speed anything with Bakudu. Whatever. Or how about max difficulty kids mode high-speed knockdown hyper beast only Ganesha vs. Stun?
There is, however, an exception to that rule, and it only applies to the Japanese version of Bloody Roar Extreme. And that re-release that happened on the Xbox.
Released first in the US in the summer of 2003, not much is different between the Xbox and GameCube North American versions except two things. One, all the animated cutscenes were redone as computer-generated cutscenes, put together by a small group of people who would eventually become a part of the Chinese game development and art production group, Mindloader Software. This might actually be a step down presentation-wise, because now everyone looks stiff and awkward when they move around. Kinda like in the earlier Bloody Roar games. Add in that it looks like the characters are struggling to express any sort of emotion with their faces, and half the time, these cutscenes feel like you're watching someone play with dolls.
What? Was there some cutaway gag I was supposed to do?
In short, much like the music, this art choice was a mixed bag. It fixed some problems while creating others, like how
Eureka!
Whatever. Her face doesn't dramatically change between shots anymore, but in Alice's ending, Yugo looks at her with an incredibly creepy grin.
I wonder what you taste like.
The second and more important difference is that these versions have an extra character to unlock in them, and it's only slightly annoying to do.
First, beat arcade mode with every character. Then, keep picking random on the character selection. If you're either lucky or patient, eventually you'll find a 17th character, and it's none other than... Yes, it's Fang from the Bloody Roar manga. Once unlocked, he can be used whenever as a third costume for Yugo. Except that he's not just a third costume. While many aspects of Fang are modeled after or straight up copied from Yugo, including his pre-fight animation, fighting stance, throws, some basic attacks, and the Spiral Fang Beast Drive, the two don't play the same. Fang either doesn't have most of the same attacks as Yugo, or they can't bridge between each other the same ways, so that means no spamming the 1-2 of the 1-2 body upper over and over for Fang. Fang plays more like Yugo used to, as more of a general brawler than a pure boxer. He also has some of Yugo's old moves, like the axe kick and the crescent kick. In addition, one of his beast drives is based off of events in the manga. Fang's second beast drive is a 1-2 punch with his Wolfgang Silver Gloves, which forces the opponent into human form and completely drains their beast gauge. Of course, it also drains Fang's beast gauge, so it's more of a defensive maneuver. Though it still does some damage, so it's not as defensive as Kronos' bar-draining beast drive. And just in case you were wondering, he doesn't have his own ending.
Well, I've put this off long enough. Let's try making sense of some of these characters' prologues and endings. And it wasn't easy either. I mean, some of these characters have their backgrounds in other people's prologues.
Yugo left his leadership role at the World of Coexistence and is confronted by... someone, only addressed as Mr. Mogul, who tests him by sending a few people after Yugo before discussing the tournament, which Yugo heard some bad rumors about. In his ending, Yugo has Kronos nearly beaten when Gato comes in with... guards? Soldiers? Yugo tells Gato to stand down before having one last bout with Kronos, abrupt cut to Yugo on a bike, and he rides off.
You might have noticed that the prologue had nothing to do with the ending. Get used to that.
Bakudu, whatever, has apparently become the vice president of the WOC, and made it into a company where jobless zoanthropes could find work. Prior to the tournament, he gets contacted by a wandering journeyman Yugo. Bakaru, whatever, entered the tournament because, and Yugo says he'll see him there, and that he expects Bakaru's whatever best and won't accept any excuses such as, quote, lack of exercise or too much desk work you have been engaged. This is why Bakaru,
Screw it! Your name's Kenji from now on!
ends up facing Yugo in the final level instead of Kronos. Yugo then congratulates Kenji on whooping his ass and then gives him a noogie. Alice is being kept in the dark about Yugo's whereabouts by Kenji. She gets a letter from Long, which we never know what it says, but it does lead to her fighting Long at the end of arcade mode. She's approached by Yugo carrying an unconscious Kronos and promptly smacks her bitch up because they both could have been killed? This isn't Mortal Kombat, Alice. Calm down. You already heard about Yuriko, whatever, her prologue, which if nothing else confirms Mitsuko is still alive and kicking. In her ending, the arena starts collapsing because, but she saves herself and Kronos by somehow reverting briefly to her original beast form, way back in the first Bloody Roar when she was a Tylon test subject. Kronos thanks her and says some destiny awaits her or some shit, and then we take a trip to the Uncanny Valley.
Speaking of experiments, both Koryu and Uranus have prologues. But not endings.
Koryu's prologue doesn't say much, but it does reveal his name when he was still alive, Kato Ryuzo, as well as the company that made Koryu, Yunchi Manufacturing Inc., which used to be a branch of Tylon, but kept going after the main office collapsed. And thanks to the translation job, it says his codename was... his codename is Iron Mall.
Sorry, I have to do it.
I am Iron Mall. Uranus is what Yuriko is supposed to be able to transform into, though it's left unclear whether Uranus is some sort of time slip version of her or a clone of her. Then it goes on to say, quote-unquote, Yuriko was Gaia's husband and god of sky in the Greek legend.
They left out that Uranus is also Gaia's son. Because, otherwise this would just be weird.
Also, it mentions that Uranus, again in the mythology, had a son named Kronos and was killed by him, which some have interpreted to literally mean Uranus is Kronos' mom. It's no surprise then that Kronos faces Uranus at the end of arcade mode, and Uranus faces... herself. Missed opportunity. Speaking of, Kronos' outfit is fitted with sensors to collect data for his father, King Orion's research. He revealed that his mother and a friend named Jane died from some war in his village when he was really young, and enters the tournament to find out what really happened there and what's going on now with the kingdom.
Guys, I just had a thought. What if the experiments everyone's talking about have something to do with the sensors in my suit?
In the end, Orion orders more experiments and Kronos tries to kill himself, but Orion stops him, quite easily might I add, and says the experiments will lead to a peaceful world between humans and zoanthropes. Kronos goes along with it because he's really naive, I guess. Meanwhile, Sheena gave up her mercenary work and is living somewhere doing something when Yugo visits her. He tells her that the village she was supposedly the only survivor from had someone else who survived, a guy named Kronos who entered a fighting tournament.
Well, since they went with the anime-style cutscenes, I guess it's appropriate they used the brand new character who's somehow really important to an established cast member trope.
Those bullies are being mean to Gary Stu. Who the hell is Gary Stu? I don't know, but apparently he's my best friend.
After winning the tournament, Sheena is about to leave when Kronos confronts her and asks her to help, quote, solve the zoanthrope mystery. Perhaps confused by what the hell he's talking about, Sheena says no and moves on, by walking in place a few yards away from him.
So that whole build-up they were going for with the long-lost childhood friends thing just went completely unaddressed.
Gato met with a woman, supposedly Jenny, saying this will be his last whatever he's doing, and the woman snaps at him saying, quote, the research facility over there will definitely be mine. In the end, Gato is shown signing a deal with King Orion in which he'll oversee human zoanthrope peace operations. Dude, Gato is the last person who needs to be told that. Meanwhile, a shadowy figure is shown slinking away as Orion and Gato wave to a crowd that's much smaller than it was 10 seconds ago. Jenny's prologue is a whole lot of nothing, but she faces Gato at the end of arcade mode, then, I guess mid-battle, Stun interrupts and tries to strangle her. But Gato starts impersonating characters from Darker Than Black, gaining a bright blue aura as Jenny loses consciousness. She wakes up in a field with Gato, who... Are those gunshots? Jenny, I wouldn't just sit there. Get him to a goddamn hospital. Stun is actually a reproduction of what was left of his former self, as he died while pursuing Busujima! The reproduction managed to retain its memory after being constructed using, among other things, his brain tissue, by a group trying to mass-produce artificial zoanthropes.
And when you're an experiment that's been brought back to life and regained sentience, the first logical thing you do is... enter a fighting tournament.
After facing Uranus in the final stage for some reason, he's riddled with bullets by soldiers under the command of King Orion, who not only look like green versions of the grunts from Gunstar Heroes, but are also identical to the soldiers Gato was commanding in the previous scene with Yugo. Stun goes into his beast form and shrugs off the assault before staring down King Orion. Wait, his beast form's exoskeleton is bulletproof? How does he ever lose fights if his beast form is damn near invincible? And does this mean Stun was part of the rumored experiments the kingdom was allegedly carrying out?
You weren't honestly expecting an answer to either of those questions, were you?
Busuzima's backstory almost immediately contradicts itself when he says about his ultimate life project, quote, I've accomplished the study of the immortal part, but why is the life shortened with the counter-reaction?
Hudson, translate Popcorn the Fastball over just as feedback. But you know what? That's not even the worst translation in this one prologue. That honor goes to Stop Bulldozing Me.
Anyway, Busujima is approached by a woman, again presumably Jenny, who informs him that Stun has been reproduced and is in the fighting tournament. In the end, Busujima faces Stun and defeats him, as they're now in a room full of zoanthropes that have been part of the kingdom's experiments. Just as Busujima is about to run off with the result of said experiments, what I think is supposed to be another copy of Stun subdues him.
I'm your clone. Who are you? My clone. Then who am I? You're not you. Who are you if I'm not me? I'm you, but I'm not me.
Ganesha enters the tournament because he remembers his village being destroyed by some monster that was surrounded by fire, supposedly Kronos.
I swear to God, if the twist at the end is that Ganesha is Sheena's biological father, I am quitting this video series.
And he ends up subduing Kronos. Except that Kronos recovers, goes into Phoenix form, and turns the tables on him. Fade to black, and we never see either of these characters again in the series.
It's okay, they're better off not being in the next one.
Zeon is regretful of what he did in Bloody Roar 3, and tries to make up for it by... I don't really know. He ends up poised to potentially kill Kronos when Long appears asking him about the What? Wait, since when was Zeon involved in the experiments? I honestly don't understand what's going on in this ending, especially not the ridding the world of zoanthropes part. Though it ends with Long saying other people are after the same thing Zeon is, and they go their separate ways. As for Long, he's apparently part of a research group experimenting on zoanthropes, either in competition or compliance with those of King Orion. Yeah, the guy who views his beast form as a curse, had his past actions against other zoanthropes haunt him, and would only fight whenever innocent people needed his help. He's apparently undergone a massive character shift for unclear reasons. He ends up taking Kronos back to a lab and keeping him in a giant tube, where a bunch of scientists hope that he doesn't wake up and go Wolverine on their asses. And finally, Shenlong is just chilling at a bar when he turns down an invite to the tournament and brushes off a couple sob stories from the waitress and her little brother. Then he gets up and leaves to, quote, have a distraction with somebody strong.
And he enters the tournament, despite saying that he didn't want to.
In his ending, Shenlong is farting around an empty part of the kingdom when Long appears. They trade a few barbs and start fighting again. If nothing else, it's something simple to keep up the ongoing rivalry which will never be brought up again.
And that wraps up this exceptionally average game.
While still a functional, enjoyable fighter, the sizable turnover in staff wound up showing through as Extreme tried combining familiarity with new ideas, but instead wound up with a mix of what am I looking at and I've seen most of this before. Between the recycled material and tweaks made to the combat going unnoticed to the point that it's still being referred to as a port, which I guess makes the Xbox version a port of a port. Primal Extreme Fury is an entry to the series that's just kind of there. It's inoffensive. relatively safe. The kind of game you'd usually see developers use to test the waters of a new market.
And that test went so well that they decided to immediately switch back to the PS2 for the next entry in the series. You're going down.
How do I go into beast mode? Almost every night this week, I heard my dad yell out, "Beast mode!" while he's in the room with my mom. It usually happens around 10:30 at night. It must hurt to go into beast mode because I hear him groaning afterwards. Today I stood in front of my mirror and yelled, "Beast mode!" several times, but nothing happened. What is the proper technique to successfully execute beast mode?